Trott lecture, and thank you all for battling through the rain to get here for such an amazing occasion. I'd like particularly to welcome our representative, although I can't quite see where he is, but I know he's here, from the German Embassy in London, the Deputy Head of Culture, Max Breitling, and our special guest and Bancroft Fellow of the College, Jan Fischer, and his partner, Stephanie Neumann. Jan's a very dear friend of the College, one of my most distinguished and important supporters, and I want to take this opportunity to thank him for his remarkable generosity and philanthropy, which is having a real difference and a positive impact on our academic community and the civil society that I think we build here at Mansfield. So thank you, Jan. I also want to welcome and thank all of those who I see dotted all around the room who are associated with the Adam von Trott initiative at Mansfield. The annual von Trott lecture remembers von Trott as an alumnus of this college, and I feel I need to point out, because it's been pointed out to me, and Balliol, but this college most. We claim him as our own. He was a German diplomat and lawyer who lost his life in 1944 in a plot against Hitler. And this lecture remembers him and promotes, as he did, internationalism, respect for democracy and pluralism, which are the values we hold very dear at Mansfield College. And we're also pleased to have a scholarship named for von Trott as part of this initiative. And since 2010, Mansfield College, jointly with the University's Department of Politics, has awarded a scholarship bringing German students to Oxford for 2 years to study for a master's degree in politics or international relations. And our current von Trott scholar is Katharina Klotz. So now I'll turn to this year's Adam von Trott lecture, which was given by Arndt von Loringhoven. And Arndt is also a distinguished German diplomat and biochemist. He studied down the road at New College. But he also formerly served as Germany's ambassador to Poland, and he was the deputy director of Germany's Federal Intelligence Service between 2007 and 2009. And NATO's first chief of intelligence from 2016 to 2019, which must have been fascinating years to hold that role. He is the author of Putin's Attack on Germany, 2024, which focused on new methods of hybrid warfare and is relevant to the plot to assassinate Hitler. And former Ambassador von Loringhoven will also draw on his diplomatic and intelligence experience to examine how Putin's evolving strategy of hybrid warfare threatens Europe's security and cohesion. And we're very lucky to have him here, especially those of us who are shamefully monoglot, or at least don't speak German, because the book is currently only out in German, but I hope that we will all think it's so interesting that we call upon the publishers to publish it in English too. By my count, this is the 17th Adam von Trott lecture, and former Ambassador von Loringhoven follows a very distinguished band of previous speakers, including Timothy Garton-Ash, Professor David Markand and Michael Frieden, Philippe Sands, Martin Conway, Margaret Macmillan, Thomas Oppenheimer, the former Vice President of the Bundestag, and last year Dr. Kiran Klaus Patel. I haven't said them all, that's not 17, but I can't say them all. We need to get on to tonight's lecture. So I am delighted to welcome Arndt to join that distinguished list this evening. But before that, I'm going to hand over to the chair of the Adam von Trott Committee, Albrecht von Moltke, to say a few words about von Trott, his links to the college, and why we continue to honour and remember him at Mansfield. And then to Valeska Onken, who is Adam von Trott's granddaughter and a member of the Adam von Trott Committee as well. So welcome to you both too. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, and also a warm welcome from my side. My name is Albrecht von Moltke, and I'm currently the chair of the Adam von Trott Memorial Committee here at Mansfield College. And some of you in the audience might not know who Adam really was. Helen talked a little bit about him. I just want to give you a bit more color so you have an appreciation of the man who gave this lecture his name. So Adam von Trott was a German lawyer and diplomat, and a remarkable man in many respects. In 1929, as a young man, he came to Mansfield College to study for one term, having been introduced to the principal of Mansfield at the time at the conference of the student Christian movement in Liverpool. Later on, in 1931, he came back to Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar and studied PPE at Balliol College. But of course, what Arndt is best known for is his active opposition to the Nazis. He closely worked with his friends Helmut James von Moltke, Peter Jörg von Wartenburg, and others in the opposition group called the Kreisau Circle. That was a name which was coined by the Gestapo after they were found out. And this circle of people consisted mainly of younger people of diverse social and political backgrounds, including social democrats and socialists, Catholic and Protestant, church people, economists, trade unions, workers, but also landowners. And the group met in various constellations, not to discuss an active overthrow, but really to discuss what Germany should look like after the removal of Hitler. And given this background, Adam was focused on foreign policy matters and also represented the views of this group to Allied governments through his extensive international contacts. But not only did Adam partake in these discussions, which of course were considered high treason by the Nazis, he also took part in the conspiracy to kill Hitler and overthrow the Nazi government on July 20th, 1944. Incidentally, an uncle of our speaker tonight was the one who actually provided the detonators, the British detonators, and the explosive for that bomb which was planted in Hitler's bunker in East Prussia. Sadly, as we know, because of various coincidences, really, the bomb failed to kill Hitler. And shortly after the coup failed, Adam von Trott was arrested and tried. And like so many of his friends, he paid the ultimate price and was executed on August 26, aged only 35. And the Adam von Trott Memorial Committee organizes lectures and events connected to the life and thought of Adam. And Helen just explained also we have the scholarship program in his name, and which is generously funded by the college, by the Department of Politics, and by the German government through its Studienstiftung program. And we are very grateful for the support. I would also like to thank all other supporters of the Adam von Trott initiative, including past and present committee members, in particular the chairs, as well as the German embassy, who have worked hard on and support this initiative for many years. When we sat together in our committee earlier this year to discuss whom to invite as the next Adam von Trott lecturer, we decided to choose a speaker who would be able to effectively address the current East-West conflict that Putin's Russia has brought about. And as the principal already described, Ambassador Freytag von Loringhoven has ample experience on the subject matter due to his work in security and diplomacy, as well as an author of now, I think, 2 books, right, on the subject matter. And I would like to thank you, Arndt, for joining us from Berlin tonight to deliver this lecture. We very much look forward to what you have to say. But before turning the micro over to you, I'd just like to invite Valeska, the granddaughter of Adam von Trott, to say a few words, and also not only granddaughter, also member of the board of the foundation, of the Adam von Trott Foundation in Germany, to say a few words of greetings to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Albert. Wow. Dear Principal Helen Mountfield, King's Counsel, dear Ambassador Freytag von Loringhoven, dear members of the Adam von Trott Committee, and dear distinguished guests, friends, family, my daughter is here, and fellow students. My task tonight is to deliver a very short but heartfelt greeting from the Foundation Adam von Trott in Emshausen in Germany. As one of its newest board members, as was mentioned already, I'm here together with Dorothy Engelhardt, our honorary board member, who led the foundation for 16 years and now finally comes to join a lecture, and has received the Cross of Honor, the German National Cross of Honor, for her life's work this year. However, I'm also here delivering greetings on behalf of my family, foremost my mother, who addressed you here last year. These greetings come at a time when seismic shifts seem to be at play that threaten our post-war international consensus on democracy, human rights, pluralist, and open societies. My grandmother always said, and many others in her generation, beware of its beginnings. Still, I often feel we are beyond the beginnings as we perceive the shifts in our countries with populist right groups dominating the public debates on anti-immigration and nationalistic rhetoric in Germany, or marching in the street like we've seen in London just a couple of weeks ago. It seems too familiar, and it's frankly frightening, and to a certain extent feels paralyzing. In this context, I try to understand what my grandfather, Arndt von Trott, what gave him the courage to resist. And I want to share with you two thoughts, very briefly. One echoes the same sentiment that my mother expressed last year. Love and friendship gave him the strength and resilience to fight for what he believed in. It's simple as that, but also profound. And this makes me all the more grateful for this enduring friendship and the cooperation between Mansfield College and our foundation. We might be in different places with different constituencies, but our mission is the same, and this cooperation needs to be even intensified to harness the power and spheres of influence that we have for the protection of democracy, human rights, and pluralist societies in Europe today. My second thought is that my grandfather had a hunger for knowledge, good debate, hearing diverse perspectives, understanding, empathizing, but then rallying around joint goals and fundamental joint values. I often feel like we do not fully understand the dynamics of modern warfare, the sources of extreme polarization in our societies, the ways that big money influences our everyday realities. Lectures like the one tonight that we will experience today help us to make sense and thus become smarter in understanding how to counteract those forces that intend to destroy democracy, international cooperation for human rights, and equal prosperity for all people. So let me conclude my brief greetings with a call for action that we all need to find courage and resilience to do our bit of resistance today. Find the circles that enable us to do this, like tonight, and thank you so much for creating this space and for the opportunity to be part of it. Thank you.
Good evening. It really is a pleasure and huge honor for me to be able to give this lecture and to see so many people who are interested in this topic tonight. It is a pleasure and an honor because I have been an undergraduate student here from 1976 till 80, reading biochemistry. So I passed Mansfield College almost every day, not imagining that I would be back for such an occasion. But more to the point, because a member of my family, Wessel Freytag von Loringhoven, was part of the plot, as Albrecht, you have just mentioned. And he was a colonel in the Wehrmacht, actually head of division in Canaris's Abwehr, the German intelligence service at the time. He was able to acquire the detonator and the explosive, actually of English origin, interestingly enough, which was deemed particularly good material. He was, like Adam, a good friend, a good personal friend of Count Stauffenberg, sadly vessel shot himself a few days after the attempt on the 26th of July. And I'm not sure if the two knew each other. I presume so, but I didn't find the evidence for that. I even asked his sons. They were very close to Stauffenberg and part of the plot, of the inner core of the plot, but they were also part of different networks. Wessel was an officer, and Adam was, of course, a civilian and diplomat. Presumably they knew each other, but yes. So to come to the topic of the lecture, I don't want to push the analogies between Hitler and Putin in any way. There are, of course, many, many differences, but there are also some rather striking similarities, I would say. First of all, again, a dictator is trying to build an empire at the cost of its neighbors. There was an attack on a neighboring state, Ukraine, with over 1 million victims already. Annexation of a piece of land for the first time in Europe since 1945. That's quite striking, and massive human rights abuses. There are threats to the whole of Europe, and that's really the hybrid part I will come to. And Putin, we say, wants to change the European security order or the world order. That's quite an understatement. And again, democratic countries are struggling with the proper response to this. How can democracies defend themselves without losing the core values of their democracies? How can they be effective? And we have the full spectrum from elements of appeasement to deterrence and strong military resolve that was discussed so many years ago. What has changed? Many things have changed, but is this hybrid warfare. So we live in a period where there are certainly kinetic military elements, as we see in Ukraine every day, as we have seen in Georgia. But there are very many non-military elements, ranging from sabotage, cyber attacks, information manipulation, and so on, which are characteristic of our day and age. And this is what I want to talk about. An interlocutor of mine has recently said this is our generational challenge. It's a little bit like terrorism 20 years ago, a new kind of threat, of course, composed of elements of what we knew, but presented in a new way with very high-tech sophistication. And our societies, our democratic societies, have not really found effective, strong ways to counter this. And we really need to do this as quickly as we can and focus on this issue. So to come to Russia, I also lived in Russia with my wife as a diplomat for 6 years. And of course, Russia, as an intelligence officer, was my main focus of attention. So this goes back quite a long time. We now know that the so-called hybrid warfare started, you could say, of course, in the Soviet Union, there were strong precursors of this. But as a main strategy, it started roughly 15 years ago or so in the Kremlin. So we have seen combinations of kinetic elements and non-military elements, sabotage, cyber, and information manipulation. The aim of this, I think, is connected to the main goal of Putin's regime, which is to recreate an empire with strong zones of influence around them. And to do that, they feel they need to weaken the West, because, of course, we are not prepared to tolerate this. It runs completely counter the European security order that was built in the past decades. So we're seeing full broadsides against our alliances, the EU and NATO, and also against our democracies, so fighting from within. And of course, you can imagine that the instruments to do this, to execute these policies, have become extremely powerful due to the digitalized world we live in our day and age. So some of the well-known examples, which I'm sure you know, were the attempt to promote Donald Trump, especially in 2016 during the first election, hack and leak campaigns and Cambridge Analytica and things like that. Actually, a very similar phenomenon took place in the French presidential elections only half a year later. That's much less known, but it was the same technology. Brexit, of course, there were investigations that proved an interference, manipulation of Russia in Brexit. Catalonia, that's a little bit less known. I always mention that because it's maybe counterintuitive. Why should Russia care for Catalonia? Simply to weaken a big European state, and anything that makes, that dismantles a country or an alliance that's established is seen as an opportunity. So there were attempts to promote the Catalonian independence movement. And most recently, the drones over Poland and Scandinavia, also northern Germany, which I think are seen correctly as a very striking example of a campaign that has probably multiple aims. One is to simply see how we react militarily, how capable we are, and how technologically savvy we are. But I think even more important is the attempt to drive a wedge between America and Europe. Do we see eye to eye on this? When Donald Trump said this was probably a mistake, I would assume that's exactly what Mr. Putin was hoping for, because the polls said exactly the opposite about it. So the divisions become visible, which weaken or which threaten to weaken our alliance. And this is what these campaigns are made for. So in general, the hybrid war exploits our divisions, our bureaucratic siloed institutions. I have been a bureaucrat all my life, so I've seen this every day. That's very dangerous if we don't have a coordinated political response to things like that, and hybrid warfare drives wedges directly into that, and it is designed to foster fear and chaos, and very importantly to undermine trust in each other, but also in our democratic institutions. And there are multiple examples of this. It is a policy, it's a strategy, and we perceive this as needle sticks, as individual disconnected events, and that is one of the most important things we need to learn, is to understand the pattern that lies behind this. Now, the book that I wrote, the other one was actually about Poland, so it had nothing to do with this topic, but the one we published last year was called Putin's Attack on Germany, Disinformation, Propaganda, and Cyber Attacks. So it was particularly about Germany. Why? Because Germany has emerged as actually the main target of Russia in the European Union when it comes to information manipulation. And this was not well known. And it took a lot of research to bring this out. But this is definitely not a perception that was widely shared in my country, including in the upper echelons of our politicians. So I wanted to write a wake-up call. Look at this. There's much more here, and if you connect the dots, you can see the patterns much better. I was myself a little bit surprised to find that Germany is the main target. It's of course not counting Ukraine. That is the real main target, but within the European Union. And I think the reasons are quite obvious. Germany is an influential country, so any policy about Russia or Ukraine will be strongly determined by the positioning of our government. But also, if you know Germany, there's fertile ground for Russian manipulation. For a number of reasons, we have a history of a peace movement, of Ostpolitik, of what we call Russlandversteher. That means people who supposedly understand Russia better than others. Now it's become almost a derogatory term because these tended to be people who really misunderstood Russia more than others, and so on. And so there are a number of, I would call, vulnerabilities, fertile ground. There are also strong divisions between West and East Germany. We have more than 3 million Russian-speaking people of all walks of life, but they are subjected to Russian propaganda because they speak Russian. So multiple reasons to choose Germany as a main target. This also was a little bit unexpected because Germany used to be Russia's best friend. Remember Nord Stream 1 and 2 and Gerhard Schröder's gas policy, and before we loved Gorbachev more than anyone else. So we were the best friends, and suddenly we became the top targets of this. It's quite a change, and so I think that explains a little bit why people were not aware of this and needed to be more aware of this. Now, to take you very briefly through a few aspects of hybrid warfare, I'll continue with the topic of Germany here. First of all, and that was the main thrust in the book, was information warfare, which has evolved from crude propaganda to highly nuanced, data-driven manipulation strategies, which are now precisely targeting certain groups of society. It's incredible to see the progress, the development of these information manipulation strategies over the course of just 10 or 15 years. In the beginning, we had the state media, RT and Sputnik, and then we had the first troll farms, which I'm sure I don't have to explain. And now we're dealing with very intricate campaigns in social media, using influencers, more and more AI, of course. Just in 1 year, AI has exploded here. And how can you distinguish, a real photo or audio from its copy anymore? Some of the technology involves cloning or faking websites of established media in Germany, like Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung or Der Spiegel or so. So you think you're reading the website of Der Spiegel, but it looks exactly the same, but it is a clone, and it produces similar content, and suddenly something new is being introduced, which you trust because you trust the website, but it is disinformation, it is a lie, or sometimes it's just a narrative that Russia wants to spread. It may even be true, but you want to push the amplification. And then in the second stage, bots are used to amplify by the millions these messages. And you can see this especially before elections. We have traced this in Germany before our last parliamentary election, Länder elections, European elections a year ago, and same kind of thing in many other European states. There are deep fakes. One example I found particularly striking because I didn't expect it there. There was a study that the so-called Pravda, which means truth in Russia, network has infiltrated the basis of ChatGPT, the database of ChatGPT. So millions of texts, long texts, were introduced into these databases in ChatGPT, and also I think in 10 other similar networks. So in order to create a bias in these networks, and there's no way of telling when you ask ChatGPT where this information actually comes from. Yeah? So you cannot trust these databases anymore. Very sophisticated, very clever, unfortunately, and this is evolving by the day. We're always behind the wave. The Kremlin even wrote a manifesto for the Alternative für Deutschland, our right-wing party in Germany, which now has about 25% of our vote, on a par, more or less, with the CDU of Friedrich Merz. And so 3 years ago, there was an idea in the Kremlin administration to produce a manifesto how to make the AfD really great, yeah? Which narratives to use in a German context. So they did that and gave it to the AfD. We don't know exactly who got it, if they used it, but the mere thought that something like that is being done shows the kind of brazenness of the strategies being used. And to end this, one of the main, probably the main theme now is Ukraine in a German context. So trying to undermine our solidarity with Ukraine, our military support for Ukraine, and also our solidarity with the refugees, because as you know, refugees is a huge topic in Germany, and there is also fertile ground for many in our society to ask themselves, why do we need to share so much with Ukrainian refugees, which we need ourselves because we are in dire economic straits as well. So many examples of jealousy being pushed by these narratives. Now, I talked for a long time about the information operations. That's only one part of it. There are many others. Cyber attacks, obviously, and there are so many, I don't even know where to start. There was one first massive attack against parliamentarians in 2015, 10 years ago, where the websites of over 100 MPs were targeted and spied upon, data being withdrawn. It was not hack and leak like in the Donald Trump campaign, but we understood that the security is not good enough, and a lot of data were probably stolen. And that is what spies always love to do, is to collect data and then maybe at a later stage use them. So you don't need the leak immediately. There are drone overflights, which I already mentioned. We've had many hundreds of suspicious drone overflights over military institutions in Germany, LNG terminals, previous nuclear reactors, all sorts of things. And you can ask yourself, why is this happening? Probably spying is one thing against military installations, but also to create fear, to make people afraid that something could happen. And we have a big debate about drones because sadly Germany has not prepared itself very well for the importance that drones play today. We've had explosions like in England. There was a DHL package exploded in Birmingham last year, and a very similar thing happened in Leipzig in Germany, and also 2 others in Poland. In Germany, this one package exploded, and by good fortune, this package did not explode in a flying cargo plane, but actually in a depot. It almost went wrong, and people would have been killed on this occasion. There were arson attacks, and even Armin Pappberger, who is the head of Rheinmetall, our most potent armament industry in Germany that shares a lot of its material with Ukraine. There was an assassination plot against him, which intelligence services of US, I think Britain and Germany uncovered, and therefore it wasn't done. So this is just to give you a flavor of the reality we are living in today. Undersea cables are being destroyed in the Baltic Sea, and so on and so forth. I am pretty sure that this is not the end of it, but it will probably get worse for 2 chief reasons. One is because Germany is actually rearming itself. We are going to fulfill the NATO targets, that is 3.5% of our budget on defense, and plus 1.5 on related areas. So we will massively engage in military spending and also in supporting Ukraine. And also because of the insecurity that I already alluded to is now connected with the position of the United States under President Trump. There is a widespread feeling that we are no longer so sure about the solidarity of the US in a NATO context. If Estonia is attacked or Montenegro, will the US really fulfill the Article 5 commitment, yes or no? So this feeling of insecurity is reverberating very, very strongly in this context, and I am absolutely sure that Russia will exploit that and drive a wedge into our alliance and also to the discussions that go on in Germany and in other countries. And as I said before, I think the probably most important message I want to convey is that these are not, disconnected individual elements, but it is a policy, it is a strategy, it is one continuum that we need to understand as such, and also devise responses that reflect this. And that's what I want to finish with. What can we do? I think what has been changing over the course of 1 or 2 years is that the public awareness of these hybrid attacks is much, much higher. The drone overflights, to take an example, everybody speaks about that. We see it, even disinformation, although that's much less visible and so on. So we have less of an issue understanding the threat, but when it comes to the right responses, we are, I think, totally at the beginning still. And this is a huge challenge for democracies and for democratic alliances. So I don't have the silver bullet that I'm going to present to you now, but I think there are a lot of elements that we should focus on more. And maybe they can be grouped in three groups. One is to raise public awareness. We definitely, I'm speaking mainly about Germany, but I think it applies to many other Western democracies as well. We need to investigate these issues, very high tech, so it is costly. We need resources for that. It's minimal what most of our countries are spending to understand the problem. Secondly, we need to publish these results. We have been very timid, very careful about that, even if we knew that certain things were going on. We didn't publish them because, there was a reasoning. Russia wants to scare us, so if we publish this, then we scare our society even more. But I never really bought this argument. It's a bit complicated. I think one needs to educate the society. They need to understand what goes on, and that would prepare the resilience or the resistance of our society, then supporting political responses. And secondly, to build resilience. That's the main key word one usually hears in this context, build resistance. I think that's not enough, but I'll come to that in a minute. But definitely public education, critical thinking. There are countries like Sweden, Finland, that are extremely good at this, far ahead, definitely, of Germany. So there's some best practices all over Europe, or maybe even Taiwan or so in other parts of the world, that we should turn to and understand what they are doing and why this is working. There's one field which I find quite fascinating. One can debunk fake news or disinformation afterwards, but one can also pre-bunk or inoculate the target individuals or society. So if the professionals dealing with this know that a campaign is going to come, one can spin this and make people aware that this is going to happen and what it really means and so on. And experiments have shown that this can immunize to a certain extent a given population. There's a wonderful scholar called Sander van der Linden, who works at Cambridge University. He's a psychologist. He's written a book all about this idea of inoculating societies. And as one case in point, what the Americans and Brits did before the full-size invasion of Russia in Ukraine, for many weeks, they kind of inoculated the world press that this was going to happen and how to prepare itself and so on. This is, if you like, an example of this, which of course presupposes a trade-off between keeping things secret and inoculating the population. And I think this is partly the way we are going as well. Of course, hardening cybersecurity, critical infrastructure, this is a huge area which we are only at the beginning. And in Germany, you don't need that, is reforming the intelligence services. Ours have been very good. Yeah? I worked in them. but their competencies were extremely limited for intentional political reasons. In the end, it goes back to the time of Hitler. We did not trust our intelligence services, and we relied on the Americans and other allies to give us important information about intelligence about terrorist plots and so on. Now this may no longer happen, and we need to strengthen our services. We have a big debate about that, and much more political readiness to I think, for the first time in decades. And that's also part of building our resilience. And what I want to finish with is something which sometimes is seen as controversial. I think we need a much more robust and also offensive arsenal against hybrid warfare. Deterrence, for instance, is a term that usually applies to military warfare, but not to the non-military or to the hybrid elements. Why not? If we are really in a hybrid war, as even our Chancellor Friedrich Merz now acknowledges, I think we need to devise deterrence strategies in a hybrid context. And that could be, for instance, cyber signaling, which is what Americans have done a couple of times. They have shown to Russia that they can also enter the systems of Russian critical infrastructure and potentially sabotage them. So to show that, show your claws, yeah? Show your weapons. And we are not doing this. I don't know if Britain is doing that, but I think that's very good, yeah? To show your capabilities, and then you enter a new kind of equilibrium of deterrence, which in a way is reminiscent of previous purely military equilibrium, naming and shaming. And finally, I think campaigns. I talked a lot about disinformation campaigns of Russia against Germany and other countries. We don't do that. But actually, why not? Why can we not think of campaigns not based on lies and disinformation, but on true information like corruption in Russia or the real costs of the war in Ukraine and many other topics that we want to be seen spreading in those societies. And of course, that's what Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty used to do in the old days. But today we live in a totally different world. So need to translate that into social media, internet, YouTube, use Russian exile media, and so on. So find a new way to promote our own campaigns. I think it's something that's not even being explored, and I do not understand why. To finish, one final thought of optimism. It was amazing to see what happened in Moldova recently. This was a small country close to Russia, massively targeted by all aspects of hybrid warfare. And nobody I know was very optimistic about this, because also how to defend them. 70% of their population voted for pro-European parties, 70%. How did they do this? And I've seen some first investigations. The main thing is that they understood that this is all part of one strategy. It's one continuum. So they created interinstitutional task forces and worked on all aspects of counter-hybrid warfare. Yeah? Police, changing the law, cyber, following crypto money is very important, and so on and so forth. So there's this comprehensive approach, and that certainly helped deliver this result. So I hope we can be inspired by the Moldovan example. Thank you for your interest, and I think we'll...
Well, thank you, Arndt, for a fascinating and frankly terrifying talk for all of us. I do wonder if there's a sense that this is something we just don't really want to believe, or has the effect of making us not believe anything meant that we won't believe stories on this? Because in a way, what you're asking people to believe is a conspiracy theory, at the same time as saying that the media is full of conspiracy theories and they're all wrong. So I wonder how we sort of educate people to know what's true and what's not. Is this a thing you think the mainstream media should be doing? Is it about media literacy for children? Is it about decision makers?
I think all of us, definitely. It's certainly not only an issue for politicians. It's very much an issue for our education system. The Finns, they teach critical thinking and disinformation, mainly coming from Russia, even they start in kindergarten, I think. And so the Swedes do take a similar approach. I know that in Germany, some of our institutions are thinking about that. But then, of course, there's the private media. So there's no simple answer to that. It needs to, in the end, it's about critical thinking and making people aware of these possibilities and dangers.
And in this country, there is, I think, also seem to be quite clear that there were certainly links established between Russia and the Cambridge Analytica attack really on the Brexit referendum, which I think is pretty established. And that, but I'm not sure that gets called out by politicians very often from the mainstream parties. So again, do you think they should be being more overt about this, about the links between Russia and other parties and the far right parties?
Well, I cannot give any recipes to Britain, but in Germany, definitely, I believe so. We actually have a particular problem in Germany with our Russia policy, because I briefly mentioned Nord Stream 1 and 2, and so not only Gerhard Schröder's but also Merkel's Russia policy is now seen by many as a massive mistake. Even our President Steinmeier called our previous Russia policy, which he engineered largely himself, a massive mistake after the full-size invasion. But on the other hand, politicians and high-ranking civil servants are not really ready to go back and dig deeper and try to elucidate what exactly went wrong, when, why, who was responsible, which decision was wrong at which time, and so on. So this is, I think, actually a failure of our political system. Even the opposition has never done that. So this is being done by our media and investigative media. There are some very good books that are now just being published on this issue. But I'm deeply convinced we need this process. We need to understand why and where we went wrong and learn from it and understand the true nature of the threat.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Well, look, there's a huge room full of people and some microphones, so I think I'm not going to hog the microphone. We haven't got very long for questions, so we're going to start off. I can see a hand here and then a hand just in front as well. Sorry, Poppy, just here. There's a yes, and then the man just in front as well.
Thank you for that amazing talk. I worked in Brussels a long time ago, and it was the Russians who were good at mending dodgy computers. Can you tell us anything about the Russian teams who were involved in doing this work?
Unfortunately, I don't know the details of that, but what I can tell you generally that Russian, spies and so-called experts, undeclared spies were everywhere in Brussels and all over Europe, of course. So and the security provisions in the European Union for a long time were not good enough. So I'm absolutely not surprised to hear that. And I know about some of these incidents. I mean, just seeing that still today, many politicians use their mobile phones or their computers without two-factor authentication and so on. So this whole security hygiene issue is still, minimal. Although we know all this by now, our mindset needs to change completely.
So,
yeah.
Just following up on Helen's suggestion that there's been a political reluctance to speak about the problem.
Yeah.
So the example of not wanting to claim that the Brexit referendum was caused by external factors, and the difficulty, of course, of measuring that. I'm thinking about the kind of political moment that we're in now, that after 2016, there was a lot of investment in responding to this. So the platforms invested in content moderation. They did a lot of fact-checking. There was a whole world of fact-checking emerged. But right now we have this crisis whereby all of the fact-checkers have been defunded by the platforms, by Meta and X and so forth.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, the other major source of funding, USAID, for this kind of work, has been withdrawn. So whilst you're giving a really good case that this has become a hugely more important problem from the point of view of national security, the defences have been swept away.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and that's a big problem. First of all, I can confirm what you both are saying about this reluctance to publish from a German point of view. There was a reluctance to investigate, and once certain evidence had been collected, there was a political reluctance to spread it. Many examples of that. I think it's to do with what we call fear of escalation. That if this happens, then maybe Russia will retaliate and throw out the Goethe Institute or something like that, or there will be a kind of build-up of tension which we cannot control anymore, or what I mentioned before. Russia intends to spread fear, and we are deepening that by publishing it. And so these are some of the arguments that I have heard against it. But I think there are many arguments, or more arguments to be made on the other side, that we need to understand the threat and develop proper responses against it. Now, one of the very problematic issues is that I think regulation of social media, we have an instrument or a number of legal bases in the European Union, the Digital Services Act and AI Act and others that could, I think, they're not designed to censor content, but they are designed to perhaps understand these mechanisms of selective amplification by spreading automated bots and things like that, at least to make that transparent, and then perhaps to call that off and make sure that these artificial amplifications no longer take place. That's not censorship, and this is at least the European consensus. But this implementation is taking place at the time of very, very strong headwinds from the US. I mean, J.D. Vance, when he was at the Munich Security Conference in February, he said, if you don't stop regulating our social media mechanisms, we will not give you the Article 5 guarantee in NATO anymore. He made a connection between the two. So far, the European Union has continued in a steadfast way to implement these regulations, and I think that's totally right. I hope we will continue to do that, because it is one of the potentially strong instruments to counter the threat.
I think that's incredibly important to understand, and the language of free speech is misused as take out all the barriers to disinformation and abuse of the ability to amplify. I would like to insist that this is a core democratic value. Nobody, as far as I know, intends to censor the content. Yeah? But if another country deliberately changes the algorithms to distort the amplification of narratives, that's not censorship, I think. But of course, you can discuss it. But this is the law in the European Union. I mean, maybe because I do think it gets characterised as an attack on free speech, maybe it does need to be articulated as we have a right to free and fair elections, and that means political speech must be moderated, and if you use supposedly free speech rights to trump that, it's anyway. There we are. So sorry.
I think there was.
Yes, I've got a student hand here, and then a student hand there. And yes.
Hello, my name is Nikki. I'm a doctoral researcher here at the
Sorry, I don't think the microphone's on. You have to push it up.
Now it's on.
Oh, you have to speak loudly then.
Very well. Thank you so much. My name is Nikki. I'm a doctoral researcher here at the University of Oxford. Now, I'm curious about your perspective on...
Nikki, I'm sorry. You've got a very... It's too hard for people to hear. You have to shout.
So sorry.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the delicate balance between finding, sort of releasing all of the intelligence on what we know is going on, and on the other hand, pointing fingers prematurely. So for some of the incidents, for example, recently in the Baltic Sea, I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on sort of being sure before releasing the sort of pointing fingers and attributing it publicly to Russia before we're absolutely certain? Thank you so much. It was a fascinating.
So the question, in case people didn't hear, was about how whether it was advisable to be sure before you started attributing disinformation to Russia.
Absolutely, a very important question. I always differentiate between the technical investigation, how sure can you be, and then the political decision to publish this. I think these are two very different processes. I think you need to be pretty sure technically that you can attribute something to Russia, but I've seen many examples where even after this process has been completed, for fear of escalation or other reasons, Germany or others have not had the courage, I would say, to expose this publicly because they fear the consequences of this. And I think these two need to be distinguished very strongly. Yeah? I'm with you that you must be pretty sure. With attribution, you usually cannot be 100% sure. Yeah? So it's a gradient we're dealing with here. But I think we've made quite a lot of progress on this. I remember discussions when I worked at NATO 8-9 years ago when very many countries were completely reluctant, even if they were sure technically, to expose these findings. And now this is happening much more frequently.
And then we need
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Fadel Saman. I'm from Mauritania, and I'm a master student here at the University of Oxford. And when I see the title, Hybrid War on Europe, I also understand that it's a war on the partners of Europe overseas. And I'm talking more specifically here about the Sahel region in West Africa. As you may know, what is happening in Mali with Russia backing the government and Ukraine with the Tuareg rebels. I just wanted to understand what is the end game of Russia in this region and what does that implicitly mean for countries like mine who's trying to be exporting its gas resources to Europe and what would that entail in the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. The focus of my talk has been very narrow. Russia, hybrid warfare, mainly Germany, but indeed, first of all, there are other actors like China and Iran, and there are other target countries and areas. And Africa is very much in the Russian focus in multiple ways. They had their Wagner troops by Prigozhin there, and they're employing information manipulation in many African countries, especially in the zone you mentioned, but not only. So it is partly to strengthen their own influence there, and partly to weaken, I think, mainly the influence of the French, which they have successfully helped promote. And one might even think about a more indirect reason, which is migration. So, of course, migration is weaponized, like so many other things, by Russia. I forgot to get into that, but we have seen that in multiple ways, also from Belarus, and of course that's one aim of their Russia policy is to increase migration waves to Europe, thereby strengthening the right-wing parties here.
Okay, so a hand here and then one there, and then I'm going to have to draw it to a close.
Thank you, Ambassador. Adam von Trott was a vociferous opponent of appeasement.
Mm-hmm.
The second time he came back, he tried to wake up the British establishment. There is hard evidence that elements of the establishment sabotaged his efforts, especially when he went back to the United States to try to mobilize efforts there. And hard documents have come to light that there was a letter from the warden of Wadham College, you recall, to the ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
Now, appeasement is something that I fear we see in Europe right now towards Russia. What is there to explain, for example, Germany's efforts to extradite someone, and the Polish courts have to step in to stop that? I mean, it's extraordinary that the man who did it, I would have thought in the present context, should be seen as a hero. I see this as again and again. I have lost count of the number of witness statements I have submitted to German immigration courts about, you mentioned Iran, Iranian efforts in Germany, trying to explain to them and that these people are genuine, bona fide members of the Iranian underground resistance. I see the hand of German intelligence services interfering in the court process. There's one example when, for 14 years, one individual...
Can you just not give the example, because I need another question and then to move on.
He's been trying to get asylum, and the one obstacle has been the German, should we say, intelligence services who are doing that. That I call appeasement, which doesn't make it to the press, which doesn't make it to the media, but I think it's got to be resisted very, very firmly. I very much welcome your view on that.
I cannot really comment on Iran and the German intelligence service. That's not my field. But on Russia, appeasement. I mean, we haven't framed it as such, but many people would call Germany's Russia policy in the past decade or so before the full-size invasion as elements of appeasement. Yeah? There's certainly the Nord Stream gas connection, which I think, of course, there was a strong business and economic interest in it to receive cheap gas, but there was also a belief, very widely shared, that the kind of intertwinement of our economic interests between Russia and Germany would stabilize the situation in Europe and actually prevent a war. So if you would have talked to Mrs. Merkel or Mr. Steinmeier 10 years ago, that's what they firmly believed in, and not only they. This was mainstream German thinking, and now was this appeasement? Perhaps. Yeah, we certainly missed many opportunities to strengthen our army, strengthen deterrence, and give signals that could not be interpreted as appeasement. So I think what probably came across to the other side was a weakness and something that smacked of appearance. Of appeasement. Yeah. So that's why I mentioned it in the beginning. Our responses, they ranged from modern time interpretations of appeasement to much stronger responses. Definitely that has changed in Germany and in Europe as a whole. So I think appeasement is no longer in the cards for us. We're dealing with various levels of deterrence and response. Should we shoot down drones? Yeah? Should we shoot down manned drones? Things that should we go as far as that, or should we deploy European troops in Ukraine to maintain a peace, or is that like before the First War, will it automatically lead to a Third World War? These issues, but I think these real appeasement elements belong to the past, I hope.
And then this.
Yeah, Barbara Stapleton, former political advisor to the EUSR in Afghanistan. I just want to come back to your point about Radio Free Europe, given the importance of information, as you highlighted, and that we remain so behind the curve in this. Can steps still not be taken urgently within the EU to maintain the asset that it represents before its web of local journalists is disbanded? At a cost, I understand it being under 200 million a year, it seems something we can ill afford to lose.
Sorry, I didn't catch it. Under 200 million is for what?
Radio Free Europe.
Radio Free Europe. Yeah.
As America's, it just seems madness to let this go, and surely the EU can step in at such a relatively small cost to maintain this at under 200 million a year.
I totally agree, and I think that's very right. I mean, Radio Free Europe, my wife, who's sitting in the front row, she actually worked for Radio Free Europe in the 80s, and there's still a network of colleagues from that time. The impact was very strong. I mean, it's mind-boggling to see how many, what percentage of the population in the Soviet Union was actually listening to Radio Liberty at the height of the Cold War. And it was relatively cheap to have that kind of an impact. So I think it's hugely important. So I think definitely we should invest in this. But we should also think of, novel ways of maximizing our impact, just to copy what was done before social media, and so it makes no sense to me. So how can we really, develop new, impactful strategies? But I don't see the political intent to really get into that, and I think we should muster that. I think we agree with each other. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for a very sobering and I'm silent. so terrifying talk, but and a call to arms as well. So yes, you did come up with some suggestions about things we can do and we can all do as citizens. And I know that was part of what Adam von Trott cared about, that civil society worked together, that people spoke out for things that mattered. So I hope that what you've said has given everyone a little bit of a sort of call to arms as well. I'd like to thank again the von Trott Committee for organising this, Albrecht particularly, and Jan and Stephanie once again for all you do for the college. And thank you all for coming on a cold, wet night.
Thank you.